Hi there. This is Junaid Islam, and I am lucky today to be talking to Bobby Varanasi, who's an expert on policy analysis. He's an expert in collaboration on public-private partnerships within government and works across Asia, lives in Malaysia right now, but has large clients in Malaysia, the Middle East, stretching as far as South America. So Bobby, thanks for taking the time to talk to the Smart City Council. So, one question I have, getting right into it, because we at the Smart City Council are not afraid to tackle the big issues, is over and over again, I see big projects around the world, including right here in the United States, that are supposed to be helping people. And all we see is the money has been spent, whether it's a water treatment plant or it's a new solar array or it's a highway. All the, starts with good intentions, but almost always ends in money's gone, people have not been hired. So, let me, and first, thanks for talking to us. Just ask you from a policy perspective. I mean, you analyze a lot of these projects. What's happening and what could we do better?
Thank you, Junaid. Thank you for having me. And it's a good question. You actually hit the nail on the head with the most pivotal of issues with failures. We tend to gloss them over more often than not. And I think in the past 5 years, particularly, the conversations around the modernity of technology, deployment of technical platforms has actually added to the noise as opposed to, creating some level of sensibility to the solutions. Now, as it relates to some of the clients that we've worked with, and for example, in the Asian context, what we have seen is grandiose plans, and there is a significant amount of good intent. And it's usually driven right from the top. So there is no gainsaying whether it is there any commitment from a parliamentary standpoint, for example, or a legislative standpoint. Where it tends to fail is, I think, the two parts to the puzzle. One is that the size of the projects is not as much of a challenge as it is the inherent complexity in getting the job done. Because now you're having to bring in a lot of constituent entities to play, and it is never going to be a public play, right? There is a public and private sector play. But within the public play, you've got a host of institutions, particularly the water ministry, you might have the sewage ministry, you have the energy ministry, you have the constituent agencies. Everyone is doing different things. When it comes to institutionalizing one plan for one town or one city, these people do not tend to collaborate because they have their own ideas of what success means. So their own goals obviously are tied to the ministerial goals, and more importantly, you will find them at least in the Malaysian context, every October, we have challenges with conversations around the budgetary allocations for the next 1 year. So every ministry is looking for, how much am I getting or how much is being eliminated. So they are driven by what you would call as a cart before the horse model. So all that, there is a good intent, but the willingness to actually go and do the right things, it kind of gets diluted very much. That is one part. The second part is convincing the constituents, whether it is the village people there, the businesses, bringing them on board that there is going to be a material change to the city or town, and they are going to be a part and parcel of the beneficiaries. The beneficiaries are not realized. The benefits are not realized. More often than not, it is seen as a cost play. So now, when it is a developmental expenditure piece, the constituent recipients do not have much of a say. But if it is actually a public-private partnership model, that is when the rubber hits the road, is the private sector players, especially small and medium enterprises, are actually facing the brunt of a cost upside for, dovetailing the line that the government is drawing with respect to creating a city, making it slightly smarter. So you're not getting enough buy-in. That is the other, challenge, which is almost always glossed over. So you might have the greatest of plans possible, but the constituent recipients, if they're not seeing the benefits, but they see a negative implication to them, they're going to push back.
So,
And that's what my take.
so the theme that you're really focusing on is lack of coordination or cooperation between different stakeholders. So does this really speak to the lack of planning on the early stages of this project? Because obviously once a project gets going, and certainly by the time most of us see projects, it's at the end and the money's gone. So would you say, most of these projects require much more planning upfront? And if so, why isn't that happening? Because that seems like a common sense thing. Before you build whatever you're building, a new energy plant, a new factory, that where it is a public-private partnerships, why don't we see more detailed planning? Is it political pressure, or is it that people don't know they should do this?
I think it's not political pressure. I think politics, have their own place where there is enough good intent, if not good commitment. What I see the challenges are that a nation is looking at a 20-year view and building a framework, a smart city framework. Now, on the other end, you've got the energy ministry building a national net energy transition roadmap because they have made some commitments in the COP, right? COP 26 and COP 27. Then you've got the pressure from your bilateral partnerships, whether it's in Australia or Singapore, or ASEAN, to actually, bring in renewable energy footprints, right? Now, every one of these is translating into individual frameworks that are obviously championed by specific ministries. Now, as you look at from an implementation standpoint, what you call the issues and the solutions cut across all the frameworks, but the constituent owners of the frameworks do not talk to one another. So you have a breakdown, not just in communication, but in the intent as to what is important. Is net zero more important than renewable energy? Or is carbon capture and sequestration and storage more important than, for example, looking at reducing the tariffs for electricity consumption or allowing people to sell electricity back to the grid? There are too many conflicting priorities, right? And within that context, with so many frameworks, the private sector is almost always at the receiving end of instructions.
Hmm.
So for them, the path to least resistance to adopt is going to be either it's a cost neutral or a revenue play. If it is a cost positive, they will just completely walk away because the consequential reality is going to be that they carry that cost for a long time, right? That is a challenge that we have.
So the smart city community is really a set of advocates around the world. I mean, a lot of the work we do is advocating for indigenous people, low income people. In my
Yeah.
specific area, I focus on digital rights or digital trust and make sure the data is safe and not abused. What would you want to share with the smart city community, the advocates around the world who are actually not financial experts like yourself? I'm not a financial expert. What are the two or three things you would want everybody to incorporate into their thinking in terms of, what you've really talked about, this, lack of detailed planning? What should they think about when getting involved in projects to avoid these kind of large scale financial losses that we see over and over again?
Great question, mate. And I think I have one recommendation beyond the other subsidiary ones is open data. And
Hmm.
it seems to be understood only in the financial services world among central banks around the world, obviously because of the fiscal pressures and your, what you call macroeconomic cross-border pressures. They understand it. And you're beginning to see a certain level of concerted emphasis amongst both private and public sector players in the cybersecurity space, because we live in a world where it is real. I call them the real world, virtual and real, all combined, right? You cannot have things to separately for one another. Beyond that, you're not seeing any level of open data. And in the absence of open data, how do I make it, happen to go and explain to, let us say, these five ministries and the 30 agencies that you guys are spending a lot of the developmental expenditure in duplicating and multiplicating the same things over and over again and not creating enough value. And by the time you realize it, the money is gone. And so you're back to square one. So I think open data at a larger perspective is extremely crucial for government. But I think it needs to be extended to the private sector, like how
Hmm.
the central banks have done it, right? very, very clearly. And, there are cross-border collaborations as well. Institutions like a SWIFT and others are also working very well in bringing in the public-private relationships because there is a singular goal of fiduciary accountability for economies, right? Likewise, when you think of the fiduciary accountability for citizens, I find it very funny that we are not talking about open data. Why is it not the primary starting point? Because then the money, see, the problem, what you mentioned earlier, the money goes away very quickly because we are probably wasting 80 cents on the dollar in the duplication of operational expenditure. And that is where it is going away. So there is no benefit left for actually creating that value, which can be sustained over a 5, 10, 20-year window. Then what we do is you end up, like the toll system, right? You pass the buck on to the consumer, and the consumer is only going to take it so far. I mean, if it is enforced upon him, he doesn't have much of a choice. But if it is a choice, he will not adopt it, and the consequential reality is the smart cities are failing. The very construct is failing. So now that is where the second part of the question comes to, is which I and Ori have been speaking a lot about, is in doing all of this systems design, the strategizing, bringing everything together, we seem to have lost focus on the human element completely. Absolutely, we have lost focus on the technical, the living systems design piece. We are focused on technical systems design. So the only conversation is about costs. Whereas if you think of living systems design, you might start looking at a bunch of very different goals. For example, is this a regenerative model? Is this a restorative piece of the puzzle? Or is it just modern and I need to have it? Maybe I don't need to have it because it is modern, because it is not regenerative, it is not sustainable. We need to change our entire thinking towards new goals, which is only going to happen if we think living systems. But if we're still thinking technical systems, that is the reason why we are having all these failures.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, that's great. So again, Bobby, thanks for uh, talking to us at the Smart City Council, and I am sure we will be talking to you once again. And for those
Yes.
of you on social media, join our LinkedIn feed and our Twitter feed. Thanks again, and talk to you soon, Bobby.
Thank you very much, Ned. Have a good day.